So good evening, everybody. My name is David Nifong. I have the pleasure of being the City of Decatur's Energy and Sustainability Manager, and I wanted to welcome all of you here tonight for the second of 3 community roundtables for Clean Energy Decatur, our effort as a community to chart an equitable and efficient path towards Decatur's clean energy future. Maria, if you want to go to the next slide. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We will unmute the speakers throughout the presentation, and we'll get into a discussion aspect where everybody will be unmuted. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, please feel free to put those in the chat, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. Tonight we'll spend some time hearing from our project partners at Southface Institute and Greenlink Analytics to hear more about the planning process and where Decatur's clean energy landscape stands today. We'll then spend some time hearing from experts, including some Decatur residents, about the potential for Decatur's clean energy economy, and use that to inform a Decatur-specific discussion that we'll do through Miro boards. Next slide, please. So why are we here tonight? So throughout the 2020 strategic planning process, residents and Decatur stakeholders identified climate action as a top community priority, and with that provided a list of recommendations to help the city both reduce its contributions to the climate crisis and prepare for the impacts that we know are going to be coming. At the top of that list was setting clean energy and greenhouse gas reduction targets for both internal city operations and the broader Decatur community. So together we'll set our goals and create an actionable framework for reaching them. We launched Clean Energy Decatur in October of last year, held our first community roundtable in November, took a short break for the holidays, and we're back. And Robert will talk a little bit more about that timeline when he comes up. And I believe I'll be turning it over to him right now.
Okay. Thanks, David. This is Robert Reed, and thank you all for attending. So generally speaking, we are talking about clean energy, and the clean energy that, the definition of clean energy does vary a bit. Most communities tend to define it for themselves, but that's one of our tasks, is to define it for Decatur. But generally speaking, any renewable energy source, such as a solar or wind, is considered clean energy, but also considered are things like energy efficiency and energy upgrades. And so we're going to get into that a bit and sort of talk about how, tonight we're going to get into that and talk about how each of those creates an economy and ultimately has some community benefits that are directly measurable. So let's go to the next slide. So some of the benefits of clean energy, of course, they are wide-ranging, and probably the most hopeful and one that we've seen in Aton government with Greenlink will talk about this is the improved public health, the benefits of clean energy and on sort of air quality, and then the sort of economic development elements of clean energy, money staying in the economy, and improved housing quality in addition to sort of public air. The sort of air that's in your house can be is better when you have improved efficiency, and then the reduced energy burden is an equity issue for housing that has less energy usage, reduces the economic burden of energy. And we sort of spoke about that in the first roundtable more thoroughly, but it's definitely something to keep in mind as we move forward in the planning process. So next slide. So Greenlink has done some tracking of the greenhouse gas emissions in Decatur. You can see there are projections here on the types of usage, and the good news is that things are projected to go down over time, or emissions are expected to go down over time as our sources slide towards more sustainable sources. But we are also, expectation is that Decatur is increasing in population. So the per capita usage is going to go down, but some of that benefit gets used up in the fact that we are adding population. And we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of maintaining a good grid. We've got Misty Fernandez from Georgia Power to help us understand some of the investments that are going to be made as part of that. But ultimately, the importance of looking at all the sources and all the opportunities for clean energy in Decatur are going to be an important element in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And that's part of the plan, part of the deliverables in our planning process. Next slide. And so the current sources here, as you can see, again, projecting that last slide was more about consumption, and this is more about generation. And Georgia Power is already moving away from coal, and a lot of its generation that has to do a lot with the cost of natural gas coming down, and so they've been making that shift, which is beneficial. But as you can see, the real growth is going to be in PV going forward, and one of the PV being photovoltaic solar generation, of course. And so the projections are that by 2035, that we're ending somewhere in that almost 20% range with PV, and so that's based upon some projections, and we can talk about those in detail. And we're going to have some more detail on this sort of information during a charrette, which is going to be happening in the first week of March. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So when creating a clean energy plan, a lot of locations have done this, and the Clean Energy Atlanta in particular was one that Southface was part of. And so in defining what that means for you and your pathways there are the main goal of that, of a clean energy plan. Obviously consuming less is always a key element of that, but also finding ways to incent generation that is cleaner, but all the time maintaining the resilience of your system so that you don't impact your economic development capacity. As we're going to talk about, the growth of Decatur is anticipated. It's not anticipated to slow down, and so having the capacity for businesses and residents to continue to enjoy the quality of life that Decatur has enjoyed is going to be an important element to think about these things in the future and to do what the city can within its purview to attain a clean energy future. Next slide. I believe we're coming in. Yeah, so here's the process. And so we've had the project launch. We are in the community engagement sort of portion, the input and awareness. There's going to be, hopefully, if we have a little bit more of the COVID Omicron variant clearing, we're going to have a little bit of youth engagement with school workshops. But we are also doing these roundtables, and we are meeting with several of the Decatur stakeholders, both inside Decatur and outside, with particular expertise. We've had good luck with that. We're going to review the feedback and start to develop and refine the plan. And that process involves, as I mentioned, a charrette. Charrette is a planning session. In this case, it'll be a 2-day planning session in which we take all of the inputs, and we will have developed some preliminary scenarios, and we are going to run those past the various stakeholders and develop elements of the plan, ultimately driving towards a future and the goals that are outlined in the and defining what it's going to take to get to the goals that the planning processes prior to this process have established. And then after that, the implementation around a city council process for adoption of the plan, and then development of all the policies, programs, and technology necessary for implementation. So what you can expect as residents of Decatur is that to look for a survey that is out currently. CleanEnergyDecatur.com has a link to that. You'll see it in the Decatur Focus here next month, which also has the public engagement timeline for the charrette. The charrette is the 8th and 9th of March. And it is going to be in public at the Decatur Rec Center. We will have a public area in which you'll have information boards, as well as access to the ACES program, which Greenlink will be speaking about here shortly. And they will you'll be able to sort of play with your own projections as to what efforts need to be made. And we'll take all of that information, and we'll have a kickoff meeting the morning of the 8th, and then a closing session the evening of the 9th, where we'll be presenting the sort of draft elements of the plan. And we look forward to you all joining us at the Decatur Rec Center on those days. And as I said, during the day, you'll be able to come in and visit us as we are doing the planning and look at some of the more detailed information and projections on the plan. Next slide, I believe, is we turned over to Greenlink. Am I right about that? Yes. And so we've got Eitan Gummerman and Kenneth Searcy from Greenlink, and they're going to talk a little bit about the sort of links to the economy that clean energy creates.
Thanks, Robert. Hi, everybody. Met some of you previously on this call, and some of you before that. I wanted to mention that Matt Cox, the CEO of Greenlink, is also with us tonight, who is a familiar face, probably. Just as a quick reminder, so one of Greenlink's main roles in this process is helping identify some of the impacts of setting up this clean energy plan. So we have a model that's called ACES, that it's a spreadsheet model, and it helps evaluate a business as usual versus a clean energy future. So everything that I'm going to talk about tonight is the expected economic impacts from what maximally achieving some of these targets is versus a business as usual. So a maximum amount of energy efficiency, distributed generation, clean transportation. And in a future date, we can go into the weeds more, but I think we're going to try and keep it high level, at least until later Q&A. So next slide. Oh, you're already there. Thanks. So just a reminder, so clean energy, the types of jobs are very different than what you'd see from traditional fossil, but you can see I don't need to read that whole list, but perhaps instead of, the power plant, fossil power plant jobs, there are more jobs in construction for renewables or for energy efficiency and all these other, electricians and installers and manufacturing and whatnot. So perhaps counterintuitively or not, when you switch to a clean energy future, there's quite a potential for net job increase. So we calculated in our max case well over 400 new clean energy jobs net that would be created locally. Some of the other metrics were almost $300. This is over the course of the 30 years per resident in savings, due to the fact that there's clean energy economic opportunities for saving money, bill savings and whatnot. And then related to health savings, so reduced pollution and the way public health is monetized. So reduced sick days and asthma and reduced premature deaths, it all adds up to approximately $4 per resident in savings. So if you go to the next slide. So we looked at those economic impacts from clean energy planning, but the maximum case that we identified along with help from Southface and working with the city is was not all the way to 100% clean. You can see that there's still 24% fossil fuels on the right. And both of these pies represent 2050, so that's not today. But this is just where you would expect to be in 2050 on the left with business as usual or a baseline, and on the right side under a maximum scenario. I apologize, I tried to fix this slide, but I think Maria and I crossed stream. So it's actually would be 14% fossil, not 24%, and 27% solar. So I apologize for that confusion. But so there's still some fossil, and the reason for that is the city is not the utility. The city cannot force the utility to make all these changes, and the city is a small portion of the utility's service territory. So it's just a different beast to try and get the utility to 100%. So I don't think that's saying anything dramatic, but it's important to acknowledge that. Next slide. So this next slide, which is one of my last, just shows the change over time. So Robert was talking about how we're expecting to see an improvement in greenhouse gas emissions. That can be understood from the left side of the chart, where you see a change from a couple of years ago, 2018, and a few steps in the middle. So you can see even with a growing demand in the power sector or from electricity, in particular, solar is growing as a share and fossil fuels are diminishing even in a baseline. And if you look on the right side in the maximum scenario, where we've got significant penetration of distributed generation and aggressive energy efficiency and other steps, you can see a lot less fossil fuels in particular and more solar. And the blue, which doesn't show up on the left side, is energy efficiency. So I know that was fast, but I think my time is up anyway. And Robert, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Great, Eitan. I appreciate that time. And Eitan and Kenneth will be around as we get into various things. Eitan, did you have something on the clean energy in the private sector here? If not, I can speak to this.
No, go ahead. I don't have anything unique to say.
Okay, great. So in particular, we've got some great representations of the clean energy economy in various businesses that are around the city and Decatur in particular. Everything from solar installers, and you see Tree Zero there, which is a zero waste tree, or zero waste paper option. And then Cove Tool is an energy efficiency planning tool that helps with daylighting and a variety of other things. And so there are, these are great examples of businesses in the area that ultimately are helping to drive clean energy in the private sector. If we want to go to the next slide, I'll cue up our panelists. So one of the things we wanted to do was to bring in some Decatur expertise and regional expertise around the variety of things that you may sort of consider in the clean economy, but also things that maybe you don't necessarily think about it. And we're going to focus, generally speaking, on the jobs that these sectors create, the importance of a variety of investments that are made in technologies that are keeping us powered, and then even down to this a small business that resides in Decatur that employs a variety of people. So we'll turn it over to Lindsey Miller here in a moment, as we'll go across the top and then across the bottom left to right, and we'll hopefully go ahead and unmute Lindsey and let her speak to sort of the benefit. We're going to be talking less about solar itself and more about the sort of the economy and the things that are necessary for that business to be a critical element to the clean energy future. Lindsey?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
You sound great. Go ahead, please.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here and to have so many wonderful experts on this call for our city. I am a Decatur resident for the last 11 years, and I love living in Decatur because we have things like these initiatives. So thank you for organizing everything. I think at the top of this hour, a lot of things have been said already in terms of the benefits of pursuing clean energy. And sometimes I like to flip that around and think about what the costs are if we do not pursue clean energy, the health costs, the energy burdens, the housing costs, the economic costs. And part of our challenge is that the incentives kind of really sit at the federal level, as folks may know, in terms of tax credits and other policy tools that have been created to incentivize homeowners, business owners, and others to create novel ways of installing and managing energy contracts for their homes or business use. And, when we think about the role that cities have begun to play over the last 15 years or so, the greater impact that cities have in the policy kind of world, we still lack these kinds of levers at the city level. And I think it's important to say that while we may be somewhat limited on the policy front in terms of what we can provide to incentivize folks, we do have a lot of opportunities that I think are yet untapped on the advocacy front. I am very interested in the Public Service Commission and the way that they manage the integrated resource planning process, the IRP process. I could see City of Decatur residents coming together to advocate for more clean energy at the utility level through that process, bringing some of these benefits to light for what it would mean for our citizens. I also think about the commercial buildings. There was a slide before, and forgive me, I can't remember exactly what the number was, but the carbon emissions of commercial buildings seem to be the predominant emissions indicator. And those are ripe for solar installations. And we have a challenge regarding, community solar and what we are allowed to do in terms of creating a solar field and selling energy. Or if I put solar on my house, can I sell excess energy to dancing goats? So we start to think about creative solutions within our own policy context and how to advocate for those. We also have schools as a big opportunity. I know there's a lot of efficiency work going on with the schools, but when you think about all that rooftop and what we could do in terms of solar, particularly given that we have the opportunity to create commercial contracts with nonprofit cities, schools, municipalities, all around the state. That's what we've been doing with Cherry Street, because these are entities that cannot take the tax credit. We can take it and then pass savings on to them in a contract. So there are lots of different ways, I think, that we can bring the economic benefits to the city and avoid some of these costs, or take advantage of the benefits. So I think that with changing infrastructure, I know we're going to hear about mobility, charging infrastructure, zoning laws. I think we have some of the levers there, but I think advocacy is a real opportunity as well.
Thank you so much, Lindy. Appreciate the input on that. You mentioned mobility options, and we'll move over to Sumner Pomeroy, who will speak on the Clean Cities Georgia partnership and talk about the push for clean transportation in that initiative. Sumner?
Thanks so much. And thank you guys for having me here this evening. So I'm the coordinator for Clean Cities Georgia, which is a nonprofit focused on alternative fuels and vehicles here in Georgia. And we are funded by the U.S. Department of Energy and hosted out of the Southface Energy Institute. So I've been asked to just touch briefly on EV infrastructure and funding and development options. So I'm going to hit on 3 main points very quickly: EV environmental and economic impact, the fleets, and then EV funding. So a lot of what we've been talking about so far this evening is the impact on our carbon emissions. To give you guys some numbers to put to that, gas vehicles in Georgia in the last year emitted about 11,000 pounds of CO2 equivalent, and electric vehicles did about 3,000, give or take. So we're looking at an 8,000 pound CO2 difference from gasoline to EV vehicles. So that's quite notable. Secondly, it's creating a lot of economic development. So with the Georgia, it's the EMIA, the governor's electric mobility and innovation alliance. There have been a lot of movements forward with policy plans as well as infrastructure plans for the entire state. And part of this development has brought along Rivian, which is going to be a huge plant that's going off of the I-20 corridor, and that's going to be bringing 7,500 jobs. So it's really great for job creation as well. So as you guys are putting this putting this plan together, some of the things that we really encourage you guys to look at is your fleets. So when you have people who are going to be driving for part of their jobs, is it something that they could be taking an EV vehicle instead? Some of the folks that we know that have done this very successfully so far are DeKalb County and Cobb County. So if you guys want to talk to their fleet managers, they're on our board. We'd be happy to connect you if you want to see how they've been doing it. But in addition, there's some different programs where you could get some funding assistance for that. So Nissan and GM have really good financing programs for municipal fleets. I'd be happy to connect you with them as well. All right, and then lastly, talking a little bit about EV funding very briefly. We know there's a lot of funding coming down the pipeline through this IIJA bill. And what we know is we're going to be getting more guidance from that Georgia DOT, hopefully by the mid-February timeline. And there will be competitive grants that are very likely to be available. So what we recommend to cities like yours is to look at where your EV infrastructure is currently, your charging stations. And I apologize if you guys have already done this, but take a look and see where you would want new stations to be put. The funding is going to be focused on any public areas. So public parking, schools, parks, that's going to be where they want to put the focus. And seeing where you want to have additional charging stations and then just having that plan in place for when that funding comes down, because what we've been told, the turnaround is going to be pretty quick. And another thing that you guys should consider is Georgia Power has a really robust Make Ready program. So that funds businesses and municipalities who are looking to install the EV charging stations. And it's completely funded and operated by Georgia Power if you have Georgia Power customers in your area. So that's my quick few points, and I'm happy to answer any questions and through email and help make any connections I can. I'll put my email in the chat. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Great, Sumner, thanks for that. And we did see a question about EV school buses. We will bring that up when we get to the Miro boards, which will be after this session. Well, in the meantime, we'll turn it over to George Buchanan, who runs 2KB Energy Services, and tell us a little bit about energy performance contracting.
Sure. Thank you all for having me here. Again, I'm George Buchanan, founder and CEO of 2KB Energy Services. We are an energy consulting firm based in Atlanta, and offices in Gwinnett and Atlanta. But that's to come in and talk about energy performance contracting, which some local governments and even the federal government stick to local governments as they are considering just an energy efficiency plan in general or a clean energy plan. They use this financing vehicle whereby the energy and operational savings are guaranteed by a third party and used to pay for the improvements. Speaking about workforce opportunities, we saw during Etan's remarks, he mentioned many of the job profiles involved. We see opportunities when that work is done, and sort of create a scale here. I mean, these projects can range from $1 million to $10 million and well beyond that. And so you'll see a great deal of work done in a very, very short period of time relative to the normal or typical, I should call it, bid and spec environment. And so you've got strong manufacturing potential in products ranging from efficient windows to installation, heat pumps, digital control systems. We see really diverse range of professional services opportunities, architects and engineers, data and computer scientists and trainers, right? And includes project managers and developers. Finally, most typically we see construction sector. You've got electrical equipment being installed. You've got mechanical systems being installed. You've got plumbing fixtures. You've got weatherization programs. And so from transitional workers transitioning from one sector or stage in their career to another, or from young people entering the workforce for the first time, these types of programs provide career and job growth opportunities. From the inclusion perspective, and we support 2KB, we support entities going through these contracts to help them navigate the various components. And what we see a lot of times is some really good intentions, but these projects are tied to financing, right? I mentioned that the energy savings are used to fund the improvements, which are financed over a period of years. And so, all right, this all sounded great, but we've really got to focus on squeezing out all the energy savings to maximize our project size. And so it becomes incumbent upon cities, in this case, to place incentives or even outright requirements on the general contracting community that would come in and provide this type of service to make sure that local businesses are included and prioritized, and have in place control mechanisms to make sure that any inclusion goals are adhered to throughout the process. Moreover, what we find, again, once things get started, large businesses have had through the years the tendency to come in and say, listen, yeah, we'll meet all these goals, we'll make all these opportunities available. And once the project gets underway, just to make sure that all the numbers shake out, they end up going with the folks that they've worked with before, which can impact negatively, can hinder those goals. I think the good news is there's been this strengthening and ongoing trend, not only in federal and local governments, but also within big business to improve diversity and inclusion and equity in their project and programs. But in general, I think that the industry needs to do more to prioritize opportunities for those that have not traditionally participated in energy efficiency and sustainability beyond entry to mid-level positions. We're seeing some of those changes. There's more work to do, but plenty of opportunities as well. Robert?
Perfect, George. Thank you for that. And we'll move over to Diana Burke with the New Buildings Institute to talk about electrification. We do have some challenges at the state level around this, but ultimately the topic, I'll let Diana sort of explain it and talk a little bit about the economic benefits. Diana?
Thanks, Robert. So as Robert mentioned, I work at New Buildings Institute, or NBI, and we promote policies at both the local and the national level to help decarbonize the built environment. As Robert mentioned, he asked me to discuss briefly how policies that encourage electrification can help the local economy. And he also mentioned some challenges that we have at the state level enacting those policies. But I'll talk about the benefits of electrification first. So as many of you know, in order for the city of Decatur to reach net zero carbon emissions, we must not only reduce our energy use through energy efficiency, and move to renewable energy, but we also need to begin to transition away from using combustion equipment in buildings that run on fossil fuels to electric equipment that can run on renewable energy. In 2016, according to data from the EIA, combustion equipment in commercial and residential buildings in Georgia accounted for 8% of our greenhouse gas emissions from energy use. And I think Etan earlier in this presentation showed some graphs that seem to indicate that 25% of our emissions from the built environment is from that combustion equipment in the city of Decatur. Fortunately, heat pump technology has dramatically improved over the last few decades, which gives contractors and building owners really access to these highly efficient electric heating and cooling systems and water heating technologies that can save homeowners and businesses on their utility bills. In addition to saving money on utility bills, which will help the local economy, utility bills in all electric buildings tend to be more stable than utility bills in buildings that use natural gas or fossil fuels, because they're not subjected to those unexpected price increases that we experienced this past fall. A fully electric building not only costs less to operate, but is also less expensive to build than a building that uses equipment that burns fossil fuels, because you don't need to install the pipes and meters associated with that equipment. NBI, where I work, we're just about to release a cost study that compares the construction costs of a fully electric home to a home that is all electric and also includes other amenities like being solar ready or EV ready. And we found that fully electric home with those additional amenities costs about $10,000 less to construct than a typical home that has that natural gas furnace and natural gas water heater. With incentives like Georgia Power's rebates for heat pump water heaters, those costs can be even less for homeowners. Finally, these homes are better for the local economy. Georgia imports all of its natural gas from other states, but if we become 100% renewable and electric, all of the dollars that we spend on energy for our homes will stay in Georgia. And all the savings from reduced construction costs and utility cost savings are savings that we can spend in local businesses in the city of Decatur. That again will help grow our local economy. So there are lots of economic benefits to electrification. There are challenges at the state level, as Robert mentioned. The state just passed Georgia House Bill 150, which makes it impossible for municipalities to require new construction to be electric or have the effect of prohibiting new construction from being electric. But it's possible the city of Decatur could test that a little bit and see if incentives could work. But that is a pretty big challenge at the state level and might be a good reason to be advocates in the state legislature. And I'm done. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that, the information. We'll move now to Misty Fernandez with Georgia Power Economic Development Division. And we'll talk a little bit about the grid. One of the things we need to remember is that while we are moving toward a clean energy economy, most investments in the in clean energy are decentralized, and the importance of a good, reliable grid, and as well as the growth that Decatur will be receiving. So I'll turn it over to Misty to talk about the importance of those investments.
Yep, thank you, Robert. So it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. As Robert mentioned, I'm with Georgia Power Regional Director for the City of Atlanta and South of Atlanta, but I'm joined this evening by two teammates, Robin Pierce, who also leads our grid communication and engagement, and Shannon Ferguson, one of our partners over at Burns & McDonnell. But if it's okay, Robert, I wanted to back up just real quickly and add a few talking points about what Georgia Power and Southern Company are doing with greenhouse gas emissions. And so if you weren't aware, both of our companies obviously are very committed to delivering a clean energy future. And we're doing that by advancing a net zero goal by 2050 with an interim target of achieving 50% of those greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. So we're very excited, very committed, and we applaud the city of Decatur for your leadership in this space as well, as we work with municipalities across the state. And very few of those municipalities have the leadership and the focus in this area, like the way you're demonstrating. But as Robert mentioned, we are also preparing for growth, right? So the ARC predicts that nearly 2.3 million people will be added to our 21 county region in Atlanta by 2050. And so it's upon us to make sure that we're prepared for that growth and that density. That would be the equivalent, to put that in perspective, as if the entire metropolitan area of Denver came and was transplanted into the Atlanta region. So big population growth. And to his point, we are preparing our infrastructure, because while we don't know where that density will be among those 21 counties, we certainly know that Decatur is going to get its portion of it. And so to that end, we are investing. One of our largest projects is grid infrastructure, grid improvements. And so this is a 12-year, $7.5 billion initiative that's going to improve the service and reliability of our infrastructure in communities across the entire state of Georgia. It's aimed at reducing both the number and the duration of power outages that you have. And it was approved by the Public Service Commission in 2019 to take place in 3 phases, right? So at the end of this project, and after our 12-year project concludes, we'll have upgraded over 1,500 miles of transmission and distribution lines. We will also have improved 35 substations, and all in all, we'll have impacted over 280,000 customers. But what this means specifically for the city of Decatur, what's exciting is that Decatur was one of the cities that are in the first wave of these investments. And so as our teams went around the state and performed studies to pinpoint where did we have opportunity to place these investments where we would get the largest improvements, we identified 4 grid projects for the city of Decatur area. And my teammates on the call can give more specifics on this in the Q&A portion if you need those. But these 4 projects are targeted to make facility, material, and technology upgrades to your lines and power poles above ground, but also includes a project to bury 7.2 miles of what we call overhead lines and bury those underground. And so, as you know, when we make these improvements for the overhead lines, that makes them less susceptible to weather-related outages. And when they're underground, that makes them much less prone to tree canopies and vehicles and other risks that can impose themselves on our infrastructure. What's really exciting is that at the end of these 4 projects, this will benefit over 9,500 Decatur residents. And so at a population of about 22,000-ish in Decatur, that's over 40% of your city will be benefiting from upgrades in infrastructure. And so while we're in the final stages right now of engineering for this project, construction is picking up and will last through the balance of 2022. And we are actively partnering with our communities to make sure that they are aware and they are engaged as these construction projects come into their areas. So I'll close by saying, just know that we are here, that we are fully committed to making smart investments in our energy future. It's not just our business, it's also our home. And we are, like I said, fully committed to making sure that we're delivering on clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy for all of our customers across the state. Thank you, Robert.
Great, Misty. Thank you for that. And we look forward to having you and your teammates around for the Miro board session. And so thanks for that. We'll close it out with Carl Seville. Carl is a green building consultant and has been doing in this work for a very long time. His business is based in Decatur, and we'll talk a little bit about the sort of jobs and work that green building and residential sector generates. Carl, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So I'm Carl Seville with SK Collaborative. As Robert said, we're a consulting firm located here in Decatur. We're basically the boots on the ground in the construction industry. We work with builders, developers, businesses, and even homeowners to certify their homes and apartments, and even some commercial buildings, both new construction and renovation. And this, how it relates particularly to this, is we certify projects to meet the city's high performance building ordinance. Our work is primarily addressing construction quality, making sure these projects meet the standards of various green building programs by inspecting the work during construction, and we test at completion to make sure they achieve their goals. In many cases, what we really are doing is pretty much enforcing the energy code and manufacturer's instructions, which leads to high performance buildings. People don't have to do a lot of big changes to make a building green or high performance. They basically just have to design it and build it properly. When we do this, the results are lower energy bills, improved comfort, better indoor air quality, which leads to healthier occupants and reduced impact on the environment. We do our work throughout the country, but Decatur, to date, we have certified in the city of Decatur 157 single-family homes, 816 multifamily units, including the Decatur Housing Authority properties, Trinity Walk and Oakview Walk. And we've also certified 5 commercial projects, including Publix and the WeWork interior finish out. And currently in planning or in construction, we're working on 35 single-family homes and 662 multifamily units, including Swanton Heights renovation of the Decatur Housing Authority and the Toll Brothers project next to the Publix. And we're also working on the new Decatur Housing Authority offices on Trinity Avenue. So the real key here is that we focus on making sure buildings are built correctly. We work with people in the design stage and throughout construction to make sure that the buildings perform properly so that they are energy efficient. Thanks.
Great, Carl. Thank you for that. So we will make a quick transition now. And for those of you panelists who can stay around and help be part of the conversation, we appreciate it. If you're not able to stay, we understand and bid you adieu. And in the meantime, if everyone who does have their camera on, if we can do the sort of applause for our panelists that we do on these, where we just do a little hand thank you for that. We appreciate your time and commitment to the clean energy future for Decatur. But we'll move now into the Miro boards. And for those of you who are experienced in this, we're going to be put into this, here are the logistics for this. Please sort of take a moment and read these in particular, but you can move around and zooming in and out. It does end up zooming you in very directly as you first come in, but you are able to zoom out to see all of the elements of the exercise. And ultimately what we're doing is we're asking some basic questions about what you heard here tonight and what you think about Decatur and the planning process. And please give us a moment here to do a little bit of a closing remarks, but I think that I'm very pleased with session 1 in particular, so thank you all for that. Oops, there we go. And so this is for those of you who've got the screen back up, the presentation, thank you, Maria. We do have the QR code here. If you want to scan that with your smartphone, that will take you to the Clean Energy Decatur survey. And if you haven't completed that already, please do. And you can also find it at the cleanenergydecatur.com website. But if my team can let me know if I'm forgetting anything in particular, and then we'll let David give us our final goodbyes.
So just on the survey, I would also let folks know that if you open your print edition of the January-February combined Decatur Focus magazine, the QR code is in there as well. And so that'll just take you directly to the survey. But again, I just wanted to thank folks for taking the time out on this Wednesday evening and joining us and adding on your terrific ideas and input. Hope to see you at our next roundtable, which is scheduled for February 24th, same time, 6 to 7:30. And I would encourage you to try to drag somebody with you and get somebody to take the survey as well. And then we'll be having that the integrated planning charrette at the Decatur Rec Station March 8th and 9th. And so we'll be trying to get some more information about that online soon, and also into the March edition of the Focus, talking more about what that process will be, how you can be involved in the safety precautions that we'll be taking to hold that safely in person at the rec center. So thanks to everybody for being here. Thanks to our great presenters. I always leave these, really energized and grateful for the expertise that we have here in Decatur. So have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great session. Thanks.